swear, this thing's like herpes. It's the gift that keeps on giving and never goes away. Let's see, this is a Texas Star DX400. And our problem with this is it showed up and initially had a bias issue. And we had some schmutzollery going on down in here. And we got that fixed. And as soon as we got that fixed, we went and keyed it thinking we had the problem solved, and all of a sudden the 10 ohmers over here go up and smoke and it popped 2 transistors. Now, as we all know, this has got 4 red dot Toshiba 2290s in it. 1, 2, okay. And I went, oh, I know what that is, 12 volt on the bias, so we lifted the bias, replaced the transistors once again, and you'll never guess what happened. Popped your uncles. That's right. Took out 2 more. So now we're a total of 4 transistors into this thing. Now, at that point, what I figured out is we did not have 12 volt current on our input side. Okay? It was not present at all until we keyed. And as soon as the circuit got energized with a little bit of RF, that's when we saw the 12 volt become present over here, killing the transistors. So I got to think itself, yes, what would allow 12 volt current to run slowly from the output transformer to the input transformer? On the end of each one of these resistors is a little blocking capacitor, okay? What this little blocker does is it keeps the DC away from this ground DC, okay? Well, since we lifted the bias, there's no return flow back to ground whatsoever. And it's running right through these caps going to ground. I'd love to test this one, but it broke off and disintegrated once I went and I pulled it out. This one here, I doubt we'll be able to get the camera to focus close enough. Is muffed. You see that? So we're going to check this with our voltometer, even though it might not show open until presented with a little bit more current, like in operation. I don't know about you, but I can talk about myself. I'm getting a little bit tired of changing 2290s here. So we're not showing an open, but this thing is broken. This cap is physically damaged. As in like, whoop, there goes the leg. So unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to know. We're kind of pissing in the wind, shooting in the dark at this point. Like a cowboy trying to ice skate uphill on a river of horse piss. We also had a 330 that was pretty massacred. Oh, my phone has not stopped today. Has not stopped. Also had one of the 330 puff capacitors that goes across on the output side was pretty darn massacred. And about the only other thing that I can... But the only other thing I can do for elimination would be to pop this screw and this screw out. And let's lift the board up real quick and take a quick look for her. But for us to do that, look, our output section's not even soldered down. Son of a diddly-doo fart. Well, this ground's lifted too. Well, hell, this is easy. Let's back 2 screws off and see what the bottom side of the board looks like. Well, I can tell you after thoroughly looking at it, and looking very close underneath it, we don't have a problem underneath there. Looks pretty darn stock to me. Pretty darn stock. Well, let's slap this back together. With our bias being lifted, I'm going to neutralize it to ground. But with our bias being lifted, there's not a whole lot left that can dump 12 volt raw voltage on that leg of the transistor unless it's coming from the flyback. So got to digging around in the bone pile and I grabbed a couple more out of a used suite, and it's close enough to get the job done. So give me a minute, let me solder all these little bits that are all unsoldered, like this and this down here. Let me get that all put together, and we'll put some transistors in it real quick. Win, lose, or draw, I'm going to beat this thing. Okay, so we've got this all put back together for the most part. We have it neutralized ground, so Class C, 100% of ground, and we've got it probed for any voltage that might show up on the input transformer, which I doubt we'll see. This is a 1,000 watt slug and peak, 1,000 average, 5 watt slug and reverse. Hello, audio, 1 2 1 2. Input tune is hello, great. Hello. Please note we're on 12 volt. Okay. So now this is a little bit of the twitchy bit of the thing. This is where we bring the bias in board. And we're going to try our 12 volt, or we're going to try our circuit without the grounding in place. So we're going to remove this. We're going to reconnect here. We're going to reconnect here. And we're going to see what it does with a little bit of input voltage, just a little bit of current on our input transformers. And we'll see if it runs stable. It's been modified. It's got an aftermarket relay in it. And for some reason the preamp's not working. So after I get this fixed, then I gotta figure out what's wrong with the preamp. Oh, that's too high. That'll drop. Okay. 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 Okie doke. All right, let's try it. Worst can happen. Launch 2 more transistors. Okay, bias is all hooked up. And let's see what happens. We're probed onto the input transformer here. Hello, audio. Oh, that's a good thing. That portion of this nightmare is repaired. So we got all 4 transistors working. Bias is switching on and off. Our input choke, that's the main reason this came in here. This input choke isn't frying up anymore. I want to add a piece of heat shrink to this piece of coax because it's got a nick in it and it's a little bit too close to this input resistor. And this is a really nice Russian transistor. It's got a very incredibly quiet noise floor, but here, check it out. Got nothing on the preamp side of life. So, power off. And this one's been recapped with a 25 volt cap, which is good because it means you can volt it a little bit. Let's fix this first, then fix this last. So I changed the preamp. It's got just such a low noise floor that a little confusing. It threw me for a loop. But what really got me was this. turn the amp off and I wasn't able to talk through it. Now I am. Check it out. Let me show you input drive here real quick. Hello, audio. And what it was our relay. The middle leads needed to be on the bottom leads need to be on the top, and the top leads need to be in the middle position. It was, and then with a little bit of, and then a little bit of, and then a little, it was fucked. So I got all this discombobulated here on the relay and figured out in frame BBI, got this all figured out. So our preamp is now working, and I'm pretty sure that this transistor was good. Just throwing that in there for the record. It was, this guy here was giving us a hard time. So, okay, now we're on 14 volts, and let's see what we're getting out of it for power. Once again, 1,000 watt slug and peak, 1,000 in average, 5 watt slug and reverse back from the bird, 10,000 watt dummy load. Hello, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. All right, so we're on high. Hello, 550 watts, works just as advertised. Now we're going to go to medium. Hello, dial a watt is working. Now we're going to go with low. Hello, audio 1 2. Now, believe it or not, that's how this works. High, dial a watt, medium, low, or sideband delay medium. This thing works. It all works right, and it's 100%. I gotta call my customer and see if he wants me to throw lights in the face of this thing, because we got power on light, no preamp, no sideband, or no dial a watt. We got sideband. And being that these are about $5 a piece, there's $20 just in lamps. So we'll see if he's even interested in that. As far as I'm concerned, this bag of problems, this particular bucket of bolts, is no longer an issue. And short of the lamp thing, I'm done with it. So now that I got this out of the way, I can actually go work on something I want to work on, which is what the actual whole video is about. I shall return, gentlemen, and let's get on with the show. Hey guys, BBI here. I want to stop and say thanks for tuning in and checking out whatever the video is about that's about ready to come up next. If you could take a minute and hit subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you enjoy what you've seen here, make sure to hit the like button. We'd greatly appreciate your support. Anyhow, guys, all that aside, let's get on with the show. Dankeschön, darling, Dankeschön. How you tore your dress, oh what a mess, I confess. Darling, Dankeschön, darling, Dankeschön. So this is the main course of this video. This is what I wanted to do from the word go. There's a long drawn out history that goes on with this amplifier. This little guy here, which is a Capacitor 1200, 12 gauge. So this amplifier and I first come into contact with each other when I was 29 years old. So 15 years ago. And I rebuilt this, I think, 12 years ago. And this is before BBI was even a thing. This predates a lot of different shit. This amplifier I built for my good personal friend, Mr. Nitro 170, right here in Boise, Idaho. And he had this in his little Ford Ranger for 11 or 12 years, good 11 and a half years. And he took it out of his Ford Ranger because the local community here has gotten thin, as in like, I think there's 3 of us on the radio here in my town. And I have no idea. I don't listen to the local channels anymore. I have no idea how many people are here. So don't take that as a definitive number, and don't be out there getting your titties all up in a twist with a pair of nipple clamps going, there's more than that on the radio here, BBI. You don't know everything. I don't want to hear it. I don't know. I don't care. I'm not into that. I talk on 6. So I'm just saying that the local community here got so thin that it's not like what it was back in the day. And he didn't talk on it very much. And he got tired of having all the extra batteries in his truck and the extra driver linear and all the radio. And so he sold it. And he put it up for sale for like $800. In here we're going to find a Viper sticker. And maybe, I don't know, I don't remember what the inside of this looks like. I remember I put a Viper sticker in it like 12, 13 years ago. But like I said, this has been running around town for over a decade. Used almost every day for a decade. Never had a single problem with it. It had a modified relay in it, I remember that much. And that was back when I was trying to figure out power distribution. So we don't know really what we're going to find in here. So what happens is he sells this to a guy that come through town. The guy come in town and ended up running into some people, and they said, yeah, we know a guy that's got an amp for sale. They called him up. He drove it up to the truck stop. They sold it, and it was blown up before it even got to Salt Lake. Now, you would think that if this amp had been running for over a decade every day in a guy's mobile, and then you put this into somebody else's mobile, and within 4 hours of drive time of here, it's burnt up to the ground, the guy would think that, hey, maybe I'm operating something wrong, or maybe I've got something set up in my mobile. That's absolutely not what happened. Because that doesn't, that's a radio operator, sometimes it doesn't follow logic. Like, here's a good scenario. These guys, they set up this guy's semi. They had a 1.02 SWR. Okay, so you have one striker radio and an 8-pill, and they're talking their asses off on it, and they run it for a couple months, no problems. They grab a Magnum Research radio and they throw it inside the truck, and all of a sudden they've got an SWR of 2. And instead of thinking, hey, we've been running the same thing for months, and now we changed our radio, the SWR is high. You have cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. No, the way the radio operator thinks is, my God, the SWR is high. I better go tear my entire antenna system apart. And they proceed to beat their head up for 2 days trying to figure that out. And I'm like, how about you go and you put the other radio in? They put the other radio in, the SWR is flat again. I said, so what are the chances that, and the reason this came to my attention is because the amplifier had recently been through here, like a couple months ago. And they're like, do you think it's the amplifier? I'm like, no, I think it's the radio. Well, it can't be the radio. Well, why can't it be? Since the amplifier, the antenna system, the amplifier, and the radio were all working beautifully together, and you change out the radio, and all of a sudden your input reflect going into the amplifier and the output reflect going out to the antenna is bad. It's usually the radio that causes that. the radio is producing some kind of harmonic that the antenna system, the amplifier, and the electrical system in the truck are not liking. So you're going to tear your antenna system apart and blame the amplifier just because you want to run this radio that obviously has got a problem with it? That logic doesn't compute to me in my mind. Well, that was the logic system that was applied here. The guy had to buy an amplifier when he came here because the amplifier he had in his truck, he'd already burned it to the ground. And so he bought this amplifier, hooked it up, and burned it to the ground. The amplifier that he picked up when he stopped at some place, some dude in Utah's shop, I've never even heard of this guy before, some shop in Utah, it burned to the ground. They ended up making their way down to a derail shop, and the relays in that amplifier were burned to the ground. We're starting to see a train of events. Each place this guy went, it was that shop didn't know shit, this shop didn't know shit, that shop didn't know shit, that amplifier's garbage. At the end of the day, there's like 6 radios and 2 dozen amplifiers that are burned up, and this guy's all bitter at all these different shops. I'm just saying, logically, we gotta look at it from a different point of view. So, needless to say, I do believe the transistors have already been pulled out of this thing, and yeah, let's just see what we got. Let's go take a look on the inside of this. I was really proud of this amp when I did it. I don't know what it looks like on the inside since it's been through so many hands before it came back here. The reason it ended up here is because one of the shops that he went to, he horse traded around, this guy, got himself a new amplifier, which he promptly proceeded to burn up, going from wherever it was to Georgia. And he traded around because this thing was garbage. My buddy opened it up and goes, "Man, this sure looks like your handiwork on the inside." I'm like, "Well, that's because it is." Now, the way this thing was mounted in my friend Mark's mobile, to have room for it, he built this really cool bracket for it that bolted to the floor. And the amp sat vertically, like so. So it had a bracket system that went down the side and attached here, and attached here, and supported the amp vertically behind his seat, and it sat away from the wall. And then he and I, this is before I understood punch technology, and we manufactured this fan kit for it, which I think is kind of cool. And I remember I was sitting at my old house with a Dremel, and I cut this case out so many moons ago to perfectly match the openings on the fans. I don't know what this is all about. This is something new. But these screws here was where his mounting bracket attached to the amplifier. So instead of setting this is set up off the heatsink just like this much, but this is permanently attached, this lid. So let's see the nightmare that we have been left on the inside. Wow. 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 Well, here's the optical socket relay that I replaced. The little ice cube square-bodied relay that was in here kept sticking. So I replaced this for my friend Mark with this optical relay. This is optical socket relay, which means round socket relay. I didn't have any other options available to me at the time. Well, they just went in here and just ripped shit out. This isn't too bad, actually. I gotta change this. This isn't right. I don't know what this is all about. That's not my handiwork. This had the stock transmit receive relay in it. So how it works with Texas Star is the RF comes in here, goes down this wire, it trips this transistor, which has obviously been replaced a bunch of times, and this transistor clicks, which in turn fires this relay, which switches the bias on and off. And from the bias circuit, we weep off a little bit of 12-volt current that comes over here and drives this relay, which is your primary transmit and receive relay. So they use this one to switch your bias on and off and to key the amplifier. And this is the actual device that switches it from transmit to receive. This isn't right. This is me. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. 12, 13 years ago, I didn't know no different. I put these in here, and I put this in here. This wire wound resistor that's in here, absolutely incorrect. So we'll change that. Looks like we're gonna have to rebuild this. Somebody got it hot with a soldering iron. This was back when we were having to steal Teflon wire out of other amplifiers because we didn't have a place to source Teflon at the time. We didn't know. There's no RF isolation on the positive rail. It's all been burned with a soldering iron at some point. God, none of the 10 ohm resistors are even burned up. It's flipping crazy. Look at how hot they had to get this with some kind of torch to melt that, but then they'll rip the transistor completely off the trace here. Here's the transistors that were in it. I can remember we bought 100 transistors one time. We bought 100 transistors one time, and we paid like, it was like $1,032 for 100 transistors back in the day. Toshiba's. And I remember that was my first experiment with, okay, we're going to invest a little bit of money into you and let's see what you do with it. And I took them 100 transistors, and this is one of the projects I did with it. And it turned out profitable for the gentleman that invested the money, but I mean, we're profitable up until this kid decided to burn his own box up like 5 times. We ended up having to rob transistors out of that, and that took all the profit margin out of it, but wow. So let's take a look at these transistors. According to the shop in Utah, wherever that's at, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the shop, and I have nothing to say about it because I don't know the guy. Not one of those transistors is good. We're going to go through and we're going to lightly test them. Figure out what's what, and then we're going to clean this up and put this all back together so it makes sense. And it's time for it to go find a new home. Okay. Let's go over here and grab our Atlas A75 Pro. Let's see what we got. This one is supposedly good. The shop that fed me this amplifier tested all these transistors already. Oh shit. Try again. It's got a gain of 13 on it. 13. And look at what's written on the bottom of the transistor. 13. So it's got a gain of 9. And these are all 06 or OG. 0G is the lot number on these. And according to my tester, it's got a gain of 9. Gain of 9. Now, I believe the logic that was trying to be shared at one point was as if it's got a gain below 25, the transistor's garbage. I strongly disagree with that. This has got a gain of 10. On here is gain of 11. It's got an X on the top, so I'm assuming that means bad. I strongly disagree. Usually after 9, you got to be very careful what transistor you marry it with so they're matched in a 2-pill configuration. Once we get down below gains of 5, that's where the transistor starts getting a little iffy. As in, like, technically the transistor is still good, but we don't know how many times it's going to have for a heating cycle in it. That transistor was bad. This one's got 9 written on the bottom of it. This has got a gain of 8. I try to, when I am working with the customer's equipment, if they've got a transistor that's got a gain of 9 or below, to replace that transistor with a little bit higher beta gain to it. This one's bad. This one's also marked bad. The reason I say that is the transistor's not technically bad. I just want to provide the customer with the best opportunity of having success, so we'll usually replace it and its matched partner, which is most likely going to have a low beta gain itself, with a little bit higher gain. That way we don't end up having problems down the road. Like they go to run it and they're not being sensitive to the heat that the amplifier is producing and they get it a little bit warm. We don't have to worry about the amplifier failing on them right away. This is also bad. So 4 good, 4 bad. So just basically re-verifying the same information as provided once we got the amplifier, because these are all marked as bad. Those are all marked as good with the gains written on them. So we'll set those 4 transistors aside. We're going to take the other 4 and throw them in my giant bag of represented knowledge. That's all transistors. That's a lot of goddamn transistors, I'm here to say. A lot. A lot of PP100s and a lot of Toshibas and a lot of DEIs. It's everything I've ever changed out of any amplifier. If they're bad, they go in this bag. I save them just because I think it's funny. It started out as a little tiny sandwich bag like this, and then it turned into about 5 sandwich bags like this, and then I put them all together in a 1-gallon bag. So I just think it's fun to hold on to them. It's going to be a good memory, and someday if I get desperate enough, I'll have the transistors run through a ball mill and we'll sell them all for their precious metals that are on the inside of them. But, you know, that's my master retirement plan. That's what I'm basing my future, is on the number of transistors I have in that bag so I can retire. On gold and beryllium that's in that bag. Winning. Okay, I'm a little unsure where I want to start. If I want to bathe it first and make it all clean, or if I want to, I should bathe it first. That way I can clean all the thermal compound out of all the joints and all the flux out of everything. And man, I did this amplifier a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Trip down memory lane. Yeah, let's pull the flybacks out of it and let's give it a bath. All right, let's see if we can make it through this segment without the phone ringing. So we went ahead and I cleaned all this up, brought it more up to modern standards. Took the relay, instead of having it zip tied to our input signal on this 2-pill section, I went ahead and I took the relay and I mounted it down to the board. I got rid of the 25 zip ties that were on this thing and went ahead and hand tied it all the way up to here. Cleaned up all the solder work on all the different D-pads around each one of the points for the transistors. Was able to get most of the traces to unfold from where somebody had hacked it when they pulled the transistors out. Soldered our relay back down, changed out our input or output and our input. The input had these two wire wound resistors on it, 47 and 47 ohms. Replaced this, built a new one, stuck it in here, put a 100 ohm resistor in, a 100 ohm resistor in here. There's a lot of little things in here I changed that I didn't know about when I built this box, which was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Yep. A lot of little things I went through and I changed inside of this thing. Like, I had no capacitors on the positive rail, so the positive leads were coming right off the back of the transformers directly over to our distribution bus and right out. There was no ferrite on any of these leads. There was no disc capacitors. It was the 100 ohm resonance coming right out of the S into this thing. So added some disc capacitors, did a lot, cleaned up a lot of traces. The only thing I didn't do, and my eye didn't catch it till right now, is I want to go over and I want to change the keying transistor over here, which has been hacked and whacked a couple times. It's been hacked or whacked off a couple times, and instead of doing it right where you pull each leg out and suck the solder out of the hole and then solder back down in there, instead of doing that properly, they've just cut the legs and slapped another transistor on there and slapped another transistor on there. So that's not correct, so I'm going to fix that. But the rest of this thing, I think we're ready for transistors. I think we're ready for transistors here. Sitting in a Pal Talk room, they decided they're going to start playing a gate right in the middle of my video feed. Son of bitches. Cleaned up pretty good, got all the flux off of it. This has been apart and back together since I was in it. I know that because underneath the transistors it was full of gray Arctic Fox thermal compound, which I don't use. That thermal compound's got metal in it. It works great on computers, but in our application, the way we use it, it has a tendency to break down and become capacitive, and it causes all kinds of other electrical issues. It's not something that we want to use in the RF environment. So a lot of CB shops have figured that out. They're putting this stuff behind transistors, and it was working good for a little while. The stuff gets hot, and then it just breaks down and turns into a capacitive issue, and then becomes superconductive, and no good. I've never used it, but that's what was underneath these transistors and one of these transistors down here. I don't remember which one, but the transistors themselves, the feet of them were covered with it. Covered with it. So anyhow, pill pockets are all cleaned out. When we come back, we're going to have transistors in here and all our power wires reinstalled, and our keying transistor will be fixed. This poor old box. It had a good life behind my buddy Mark's seat, Mr. Nitro 170, for a decade or better. One guy bought it and ran it into the ground, and I spent the last 3 hours undoing a bunch of mess that was created by another human being that didn't know what the fuck they were doing. That's the simplest way to put it. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude or nothing, but it's like, dude, if you don't know what you're doing, stay out of stuff like this. I found stuff jumper to stuff, solder splatter all over crap. I had output network components that were shorted. This has been a nightmare. But at the end of the day, this old girl's all fixed up. Now, over here on the end, this had aluminized tape, because that was the only technology I had when I did this box originally, which was a million years ago, right? So I went ahead and I replaced this and this with actual body plugs, put a metal body plug insert in here and opened up these vent holes along the back. Put RF isolation beads on all of our positive leads, put disc capacitors on our positive distribution network, rehand tied everything, and I'm probably going to have to wash this thing again because all the solder work that's taken place on the inside of this. Cleaned a bunch of stuff up. Now, she might be an old looking girl, but where she's gonna turn heads is when she goes to the ball. All right. 1,000-watt slug and peak, 1,000 in average, 5-watt slug back from the bird, 10,000-watt dummy load. Okay. We're in 1X. It's been a long day. I've been out here since like 9 this morning, and it's now 11. So a 14-hour day? There's easier ways to make money. I guess I could go be a prostitute or something, I guess. I don't know who would pay for this old saggy ass anymore. Okay, amp off. Hello, audio. So 2950 hitting it. 20 watts of drive. Hello, audio, 1, 2. It's woke up. I'm here to tell you. Hello, 1, 1. Hello. That's with 20 watts of drive. About 400 average and close to 1,000 peak. Hello, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Spent a little bit of time working on the input tune. There's a 5-watt slug between the 2950. Hello, audio, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hello, come in. That's legitimate, straight up. That's not screwing around. That's pretty nice. Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hello. It's getting up there. Okay, so all those impressive numbers. Let's put a little bit more drive in it. We're going to jump right over to our Striker 490. Turn the amp off again. 490 on, 2950 off. Hello, audio. Let's go over and check out what our 490 is doing for power. Hello. About 160 or so watts. Let's turn on the Texas Star 1200. Hello. Hello. Making it disappear off the scale. Let's go up to 2X. Hello. Hello. Audio. Exactly what it's supposed to do with this much drive. Okay, now let me go grab the bench 2 pill and get that set up. Okay, so bench 2 pill hooked up. Now we're not seeing that much more improvement, maybe another 150 watts, which tells me we've reached the maximum saturation of this box. Remember, this was a Texas Star 1200. So anything we see past that 1200 is what we consider to be a plus, right? So let me show you what it's doing with a little bit more drive. We're on 1X at the moment. Hello. I'm putting about 200 watts, 300 watts in it, roughly. Roughly. So we'll go up to 2X. Let's turn on the Texas Star 1200, which is now more like a suite. Hello. Hello. So we're getting our 16 out of it. Solid, stable, like a rock. Learned a little bit since the last segment of video. I'm going to share this little tip and trick with everybody else. The capacitors that were here on the flybacks make a huge difference. It didn't seem to make that big of a difference when we were working in the land of Toshiba. Okay, what I had happen is several of the capacitors here several of these fuckers had broken. So I went and I put the same equivalent capacitor value roughly, that's not going to focus. Roughly the same capacitance value, but not the same kV in that spot. And just because on the flybacks, let's say this one had a stock capacitor and this one did not, was enough that when we started driving the amp very hard, it would send the box into imbalance. And this section on the other side of the relay here, it popped both those pills instantly. Because that one cap broke down, 12 volt current can run through this resistor directly to the input transformer, and the only place to ground is through the 10 ohms and back through the transistors. Well, that cost me a few transistors here. Okay. The other thing is the 1.6 ohm resistor that helps control the bias. I went ahead and I replaced all of them because I discovered not all of these were measuring the same. From when it burned up before, apparently, even though these all look like they're in good shape and none of them are visually burned, one of them is completely open. So when the 4 transistors that were in here that got overdriven to the point where they died, when I metered them the first time through, they were fine. The second time through, I had one that had opened up. And I can only attribute that to the rough treatment that this thing received here not too long ago. So, long story short, is this thing has been completely gone through, every part has been tested, and it is working flawlessly. Now, yes, there's some things I could have done differently, like I could have changed the distribution network in here. I could have changed the power wires and all that kind of stuff. Wasn't really necessary. And because this is like literally amp number 2, I wanted to kind of keep it the way it was. This optical output socketed relay is like super overkill for this amplifier, but it's unique and into itself. It had this piece of ground strap that went across it. I thought that was aesthetically ugly, so I replaced it with a single piece of Teflon wire. I rewashed the box again to make sure I didn't have any more solder flicks or shmoo or shit anywhere I wasn't expecting it to be, which has been a huge challenge for me, taking into account how many times this box has been ripped apart by other people since it was here last. That's no joke. But it's just like sex. Eventually you get good at it if you try it, do it again, 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 and do it again, and do it again. And again, and again, and again. And eventually you might get good at it. Especially taking into account how women are like, here it is, you figured out. Don't want to give us no clues. Sorry, back on topic. This thing is fighting me down to the last screw, obviously. So, happen to have roughly the same, well, exactly the same size fan, but roughly the same amperage and RPM rate as the one that was in here. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. This is not a screaming example of my work, but this is one of the oldest ones that is out there as an example. What I think is odd is this guy that ended up buying this box from my friend Mark burned up 3 other amplifiers, including this one, and he's blaming the boxes. I'm just saying, it, especially this one that's been operating for a decade or better that we know of, and you go and you hook it up and you fry it within a couple hours, that usually indicates there's something wrong with your system, not the amp. I mean, the amp's broken now, there's no doubt about it, but you don't get to come down on the box. So, okay, so now we got all of this done. Throw this guy away. I just had to redo this box for sentimental reasons. Now, because it does have a couple little points of rust on the lids, and this is not a stock fan kit by any means, faceplate's in good condition. Look at that, we got 3 moving fans, which move more air than the stock fans, but anywho, at least the new ones they put out now. The old school ones with the 1.5" thick fans on it, or 1.25" or 1.125" or whatever it is, they moved a lot of air. They really did. Okay, so being this is what it is, we're going to ask probably $650 plus the ride for it. When I had Toshiba's in it, the guy sold it originally for I think $800, and you know, I just want to get some faith in this fan. Let's just let it sit here and run while we're doing our extra. I think $650 plus the ride is a fair asking price for this little guy. It's one of the cheaper suites I've let out of here in the last couple of years, but it's not a suite. It's a highly modified 12 gauge. They're 1200. So, if you want it, we all know how this works. First one to call or text with cash in your hand, in ready to go, is the one that gets it. Now I got a local guy that's really interested in trying to get this thing. I'm fine with that, but in the same breath, whoever gets their numbers and their info and got money in hand gets it first. So the way this works, this is my only way to be able to make it so it's uniformly fair for everybody. So, on that note, gentlemen, I appreciate y'all. Big shout out to Excess Power and Siglant. Oh, new deal worked out with Excess Power. Totally upgrading the workbench's power supply. Mega super caps, lithium carbon batteries, all kinds of crazy stuff getting ready to come this way. So be looking forward for those videos. That's going to happen here within the next month or so. We're talking like 16 super capacitors, and well, you'll see that we're going to hand make here, embed in a clear body of Cyrillic, or not Cyrillic, but acrylic. It's going to be kind of neat. Big shout out to Bird, Coaxial Dynamics, and a big awesome thanks to all of you guys that are tuning in as we're going through this worldwide pandemic crisis. Guys, please practice social distancing. This is going to get horrifically bad in the next couple weeks with as many cases as we have in this country right now. And please, quit putting the memes on Facebook. This is not the flu. God's sake. Worldwide crisis and everybody's acting like children on Facebook. It's crazy. All right. I got to run. I appreciate all of you gentlemen. And thank you for your patience with me. And we're just going to keep going and going and going and going as long as we can. Bump bump for the biggest duck in Idaho. We'll see you. Bye-bye.